My name is Josh Daly. I'm with the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. We're partners with the Conservation District, with the Carrot Project, and we are going to be talking about business planning today. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Food Policy Council first. So our mission is to build a more just and resilient food system for all Rhode Islanders. So we think about the food system from start to finish, right? From, well, start to finish and then restart, you know, the whole circle. And we are a independent nonprofit organization. We're non-governmental, but we partner with a number of governmental agencies. Again, we think about all of these parts of the food system and how we work towards a more equitable, accessible, economically vibrant, environmentally sustainable food system by addressing the most pressing food system needs. Okay, so today is very much a workshop, so you should have the two handouts. So one of them is the business model canvas here, and one of them is the one-page business plan. It says plan to succeed on the top. So those are the two that we're going to be using today. And it's very much a workshop, so we're going to be working through them together. So you're ready with those. But first I'm going to make some sort of initial points about framing. Okay, so this is just a few things about framing business planning as an exercise, as something that you do, right? So business planning is about doing your homework, right? It's about knowing the business that you're getting into. It's about knowing your industry, knowing your market, right? So it's about doing your homework and being prepared. It's about getting focus. So I use that as a acronym. So F, financial, O, operational, C, customer, and this is kind of a goofy acronym, us, team, nosotros, team, right? And then a business plan, one of the things that I like to say, so who wants to see a business plan? What type of people want to see a business plan for a business? Go ahead.
What type of business plan?
No, what type of people want, what groups of people tend to want to see your business plan? Who says, show me your business plan?
I didn't know.
Investors, okay. Banks, lenders, investors. Who doesn't tend to ask you to see your business plan? Customers. So your customer rarely asks you to see your business plan, right? But if you don't have a customer, you don't have a business, right? So this is important work that we're going to do today, but then it has to translate into action, right? It has to translate into what you actually do. So business planning is a set of tools that you use to guide your actions that you're going to take, right? To make sure that they're smart, that they're strategic, you know, that they get you where you want to go, right? But don't mistake the finger pointing for the moon itself, right? It's the tool that gets you there, but it doesn't replace the actual action that you have to take to start and grow your business. Another thing that I want to say is some of you are thinking in the nonprofit space, right? And nonprofits, especially nonprofits that provide services, are businesses, right? They are not-for-profit businesses, right? They're organized. We're going to talk a little bit about the legal structures in a bit, but nonprofits are businesses, right? And so they also have a business model, a way of doing business, right? So that's sort of some of the background. Only as good as they're useful. Use what works. It's a tool, like any tool, you know, use what works, adapt what doesn't, ditch what doesn't. So the first tool that we're going to talk about, and these are only two tools among many possible tools. You can go out there and you can find other formal, you know, longer templates for written business plans, right? The SBA has, you know, a written business plan template. I like these two because they're a simple way of starting the exercise. You could take these and turn them into a longer written business plan that you might give to a lender or an investor, right? But a lot of times getting clear on these things that we're going to do today is as important, if not more important, than the rest of the writing is flows from that, right? So the first one we're going to dive into is the business model canvas. Okay, this is a way of thinking about the different components of your business. Business model is actually, you have a choice of the way that you do business. A nonprofit.
Sale or direct to.
That's right. Those are parts of your business model. How do you sell? Who do you sell to, right? What do you sell? Why are you better than your competitors? These are all the pieces. What's the financial model? How do they pay you? How often do they pay you? What's the operational model? What activities do you have to engage in? Who's doing what? I just rattled off a whole bunch of things, so don't worry, we're going to get into each of those things. But a business model is the way a business of any sort, nonprofit, for-profit, creates, delivers, and captures value, okay? So remember those three things. And so if I take that without the sort of businessy jargon, creates, delivers, and captures value means creates is the production model, your production and operations, right? Delivering is your sales and marketing. Who are my customers? How do I reach them? What channels do I use? Do I sell wholesale? Do I sell retail? What do I do that way, right? And then your financials, right? Capturing value. How do I make money, right? And for a nonprofit, I might make it in different ways than I make it in a for-profit, right? I may sell goods, may charge for goods and services. That can get very tricky in a nonprofit model, especially Jeff has mentioned and will mention that when you have a farm that is a nonprofit, that can get you into all sorts of tricky areas with the IRS. They don't know what to do with something that says farm but nonprofit. Farm usually means growing and then selling for profit, what you're selling, right? In the eyes of the IRS. It doesn't necessarily mean that in practice, we know that, right? So, production, sales and marketing, financials, right? So it comes back to that acronym again, focus, financial, operational, customer, and us, the team, right? So those are the core elements of your business model. And the thing to think about with your business model is that it's a model, that there are different choices that you can make for the different pieces. And a lot of times I see this missed in the business planning world, right? The business planning world makes a whole bunch of assumptions. How many of you are currently doing business, like in business? Doing some? Okay. How many of you are thinking about developing a business? Okay. How many of you are in kind of early stages of okay. Folks are in pretty early stages. A startup, right, that word, is a business that's in search of a business model, in search of a way that they can find a customer, get the product to the customer or the service to the customer, right? Figure out that it's actually something that your customer wants, right? That's important, that they value it, right? Figure out how I'm going to make the thing work on the back end, the production and operations. Figure out how I'm going to be able to make at least break even, right? How can I at least make enough money to cover my costs, right? You're in search of a workable business model. Priscilla, you talked a little bit about different business models. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So you mentioned wholesale and retail, right? Wholesale and retail. This is the tool that we're talking about here, right? This is the business model canvas. So take this out. One side is in Spanish, and the other side is in English. Everybody have that? So, what's that? Yeah, one side is in both, and then the other side is in English, but it has more prompts, excuse me. So, use either side you'd prefer. These are 9 building blocks of your business model, right? Of the way that you, remember, create, deliver, and capture value. So the way that you produce and your operations, right? That's one big section, right? Then your customers, who they are, how you reach them, and then your financials, right? So without going into every single section of this, I'm going to go kind of group them together, and then we're going to talk about them in groups, okay? I've said production operations, right? That is that sort of top left area. So that's your key activities, your key resources, and your key partners. And it's part of your value proposition because part of your value proposition is what you're producing, what you're offering, right? So if I'm producing something that's valuable and wanted, or if I'm producing something that is a commodity, that's going to make a very different type of business model based on what I choose to produce, right? So key activities, key resources, key partners, and part of your value proposition are part of production and operations. Sales and marketing, customer segments, who are my customers? Customer relationships, how do I maintain relationships with my customers? And channels, how do I reach my customers? Go ahead.
I guess we'll talk about it later.
Yep.
Customer segments versus customer relationships.
Yep. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that for sure. And then the last part, so I want you to have the framing in your mind of production, sales and marketing, financials. So that's how this tool is sort of broken. It's not, I break it out this way, okay? And then financials are, what are your costs and what are your revenues? So production is cost centers, right? It's where you spend money. Sales and marketing, there's certainly a spend there as well, but it's how you make money, right? So this side is how you spend money, how you make money, how you track that, and how you capture that, right? You can also think of production as your inputs, what it is that you're making for what you're growing, right? Your inputs in terms of the seed, for instance, in the soil amendments, the other things that you're doing, depending on the type of farming that you're doing, that's all related to your production, right? Then inputs and outputs go, right? There's a process that goes from inputs to outputs, and then you have to capture money in the process, right? So first we're going to dig into the sales and marketing piece, and this is where I'd say have your business model canvas handy and be thinking about the business, the nonprofit that you are working on or wanting to work on, right? So this first section is this right-hand section over here, right? I think about it as right hand when I look at it, right? So first, who are your customers, right? So tell me, anyone have any thought on their current, what they're doing, of who their target customers are, who you're trying to reach? Yeah, go ahead.
My nonprofit is focused on food security, so
Yeah.
I'm targeting specifically frontline community members.
Right, okay.
So that, and also environmental health, so that's what we anchored that location.
Okay, so you're targeting, your nonprofit is targeting frontline communities. Okay, so the interesting thing about a nonprofit business model, are those communities paying you for the product, or is someone else paying you to be able to give that product to those folks?
So as of now, we are actually providing the service
Yep.
so that eventually we want to have these community members making products so they can have their own business.
Okay,
That's what I'm doing.
so you see how what you just laid out is a business model. It has different pieces of who's doing what. So a customer, there are beneficiaries, and this is a trick with nonprofits, right? There are beneficiaries, right? And they may be, especially if you have a sort of equity and justice push in your nonprofit, also be engaged in the operations, the working of the organization, right? But they may or may not be buying or paying for the product or services, right? That's pretty typical of a nonprofit business model. So who pays for that?
We get
Grants.
grants. Yeah.
So oftentimes with a nonprofit business model, you have grants and donations and other sorts of sources of funding, right? So a nonprofit business model is almost always what they call a two-sided business model, right? You've got two different groups that you have to serve, right? You serve the community and you engage the community that you're working with and working on behalf of, and then you also have to then go turn around and turn that into how can I pitch, funders to help me do that work, right? Some social enterprises have that element and then also have like a for-profit element that they do, right? They sell their product or service and people pay for it. Another business model is to have a customer, different sets of customers. One set of customers, like a sliding scale type of thing, or a buy one, give one model. These are all different business models that you can use, right? So customers, we've got target communities that people are working with and for. Who else has a customer that you're thinking of reaching? Tell me about the communities that you're trying to reach. So if you look on this side in English, there's a couple other prompts. So my target customer is, and then you're talking about their demographic, their sort of age range, there may be their gender, it may be their geographic, where are they geographically located, right? And psychographic is kind of this crazy sales and marketing talk about their buying behavior. What buying behavior do they have? Where do they go to shop? What do they look for? How often do they go to shop? You're going to reach people at farmers markets, right? Farmers markets is a certain type of demographic that often goes to different farmers markets, right?
For my herbal business, it could be like vague, but I guess people that are into natural medicines, like natural healthcare and cosmetics. My products are vegan, so like plant-based, health conscious, holistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you just described a lot of things that are what's called that psychographic, right?
Yeah.
It's like what are the values that your customers care about? What are the other types of things that they do because they care about those values? They look for organic, they look for vegan, they look for, health related things. Those are values that they share, right? And they're going to be the thing that maybe defines your customer the most. Awesome. Domingo.
So for Floor,
Yeah.
she sees her customers as consumers rather than like necessarily paying folks. So in her current farm right now, she serves mostly neighbors and friends.
Yep.
And this is food that she donates.
Yep.
She doesn't see her customers as necessarily folks who are paying for her product.
Right.
But folks who are consuming her product.
Right. So go ahead. So that relates to what Susan was saying, where you may have a business model that serves those neighbors, serves those consumers, who then pays you to keep that going? Who covers, or do you keep it very low cost? Someone still has to pay at some level. You might subsidize it yourself. Grants, donations, other things like that. That's also a customer in a certain sense for a nonprofit, right? Because you have to provide value to your neighbors, your community, but you also have to provide value to folks who would give you money to support that work. Does that make sense? What's the motivation of a grantor? I'm going to break out a grantor/donor versus a lender, because those are two different animals, right? So one is a grantor or a donor. Their motivations, well, who's donated to an organization before? Donated money or yeah. What's your motivation for the organizations that you donate to?
I like their mission.
Yep.
I like what they're doing.
Yep.
So I decide to give.
Yep.
Out of the goodness of my heart.
Yep. You see, you like the mission, you like the impact that they're having. Who else donates? Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with tax write-offs.
For sure. There's the altruism and there's, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
But
that's like,
also, like, let's say you're making healthy food for your community, you're going to have a more productive and healthy community. So there's other ways of valuing.
That's right. This is a great point. So So there's social values, environmental values. There's a variety of values that may motivate a consumer, right? So that's one thing, but it may also motivate a donor or a supporter, right? So you want to think about who those, if you have a target customer that is folks who are health conscious, folks who are looking for vegan, not a lot of additives, chemical, other things like that, that might be a value proposition. For a donor, and a grantor is just a different type of a donor. You have like foundations, right? Which are just basically either one very wealthy donor has sort of set that up, or a large number of donors have sort of supported that, right? But they still have the same sort of motivations. There's tax benefits to that donation, and then there's also the sort of more altruistic benefits. That's the donor side. Does that make sense?
It does, because I was thinking about like competing needs, because
Yeah.
Even if like let's say someone's losing money by giving you this grant for whatever reason,
Yep.
It might hurt them in another way because now they can't maybe invest in this other thing.
Yep.
Where they can profit off of food insecurity essentially.
Yep.
But that kind of makes sense for tax write-offs.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with like that is happening a lot. It's also people with smaller amounts of money usually.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem as sustainable to like look for the altruistic group.
Yep. There are all sorts of critiques of the nonprofit financial, industry complex, right? The ways that foundations, the ways that grants. There's also government grants out there. They operate in a different way. Also it's not the tax write-off for the government, right? But it's often the social, environmental, other benefits, right? And so you kind of have to, in a nonprofit, you're somewhat serving two masters, right? Like you're thinking, and you. This is an ongoing sort of challenge for nonprofit business models. How do I make sure that those things are lined up, right? And I'm not just serving the way that the funder, dictates, but I actually am also listening to and part of and engaging and empowering the community that I'm a part of. There are folks who are thinking about radically different business models of funding. So, before I go into that, go ahead.
Where would mutual aid fit in this?
Yes, that's a great point. So there are other models entirely that may not be for-profit or nonprofit business models as such. They're mutual aid, there's barter, there's cooperatives, right? Cooperatives may or may not engage in, I think it gets to the point that Joseph was making, there's all sorts of social values that aren't captured in a financial model, right? So mutual aid means that I take out the customer relationship and it's a neighbor-friend relationship that I'm building off of I help you, you help me, right? And we use what we have together to help one another. So it's a different, I'd say it sort of breaks the mold of what the heck a business model is, right? Like it opens it up to, when you get down to it, it's people. And so if people will give of what they have and take what they need, it's a different, mutual aid is a different type of a model entirely. Yeah, Jeff?
You're right, but there is, under the IRS regulations for nonprofits, not charities.
Yep.
There are a couple, at least one or two, main models for the mutual aid.
Right.
Fraternal organizations.
Right.
So it's not necessarily wholly outside the scope of what the government perceives as being a business model of value in the nonprofit sector.
That's fair. So the other stuff in all of this is that there's legal entities and then there's sort of stuff that operates on the margins of that, right? And so we'll say that just the radical model for funding that others are looking at too. There are cooperative and mutual models for funding, but there are also what are called DAOs, D-A-O, decentralized autonomous organizations, right? And there's it's connected to a lot of like blockchain stuff. I'm not going to go way into this stuff, but it sort of takes away the relationship. There's a power dynamic in the nonprofit funding model, right? So and there's a way that power dynamic creates a bottleneck, creates and disconnects donors from recipients, right? And the mutual aid, the decentralized autonomous organizations are trying to sort of take, I think, that model of like more mutual aid or cooperatives, but turn that into a digital model. You know, now I can flatten that where it's not the distant donor who, foundation who's making decisions and the recipient, but it's here's the community of individual donors who make decisions together in a decentralized way and identify recipients. Okay, we went way like a lot of different directions. Customers, just to think that you have different customers that you're serving. We didn't talk about typical customers that you might be retail customers through a farmer's market, might be institutional customers, restaurants, might be retail stores. We'll leave it at that for now. That's okay. So, but just to think that you have different groups of customers that you could potentially reach, right? Then channels is how do I reach them? And a lot of times there's an overlap between how I reach them and who they are, right? So farmers market customers, retail customer, shops that I want to get my product into, grocery stores, other things like that, institutions, those are the channels also that I'm selling to and through, right? I might be selling online, right? I might be, so there might be online things that sort of support everything that I do. So a channel is I market myself online, and then I may have it where they're able to pay online, right? So another channel for agricultural businesses is the CSA world, right? Community supported agriculture, right? So this is, it's like crowdfunding before crowdfunding. Does everybody know, do people know what crowdfunding is? Kickstarter, Indiegogo, these types of things, GoFundMe. So that's donation kind of stuff, right? But CSA, well, and oftentimes the crowdfunding is I'm paying up front for something that I'm going to get later. I'm giving money and I'm going to get something later. It's exactly what a CSA is, right? I put money in at the beginning because I believe I love what you're doing and I want to get what you're growing, right? It gives you the upfront capital that you need to go and plant and do the work that you need to do to produce the products that you're making. And then on the other end, you've paid into the CSA and now you get deliveries of my product later on, right? That's a business model. Those are each of the things that we talked about, going to farmers markets, going to, they're very different business models too, because the choice of who that customer is can have big implications for what I do for producing, right? Okay, so we've got customer segments. I've got some prompts here in the English, my target customer. You want to think about what their pain is, what their problem is, what their desires are, why do they want you, right? And that goes into the one in the middle here, which is your value proposition. Why me? Why my business? Why my nonprofit? Why my organization over the other things that they can choose from, right? So how is it that you make their life better? How is it that can you measurably make their life better, right? Who's your competition and why are you better, right? They've got a choice between you and whatever it may be. Now your competition may also be, well, let's think about who's competition for small makers and food and farm agriculture businesses. Big businesses, very big businesses, right? And the way that people very typically get food, right? Most people get food from grocery stores, right? And so but getting into grocery stores, there's a lot of economics to push down the price as much as possible, right? To squeeze as much down as possible. Versus farmers markets, you might get a much better margin on your product, right? But you can't sell nearly as much. So that's the trade-off of if I'm going to sell in one place, I might be able to sell a lot more, but I sell for a much lower. We'll get more into that in the financial section, I'm sure. So So tell me other value propositions. You should be able to frame your value proposition in a single sort of compelling phrase. So why you instead of the alternative? Why are you better? Why are you relevant? I'm going to say this a couple times. Why are you relevant? Why are you different? And what specific benefits do you offer? Why are you relevant? Why do you matter? Why should I care? Why are you different? How are you different from the competition? And what specific benefits do you offer? But your competition is any other way that people are currently getting food, right? So I want you to broaden your sense of, before I worked at the Food Policy Council, I worked for the Small Business Development Center. And so people would say, I have no competition. All the time people would say, I have no competition, right? No one's doing what I'm doing. No one's doing exactly what I'm doing, therefore I have no competition. You have every competitor. And in fact, as a new business, you have every uphill battle to beat those competitors because what you don't have that they do have is just like momentum, right? They already have the markets. They already have people. It's already easy enough for me to go and do what I already do. It's very hard for me to change what I already do. We know that, right? It's hard to change habits. I like drive to, the same place that I drive to every single day and I don't even think about it, right? I end up at the whatever market that I go to, right? So you have to not only think what's my value proposition that way, but how am I making, so I may be able to say, that sounds amazing. You can grow all of this amazing stuff. There's all these, there may be environmental benefits, whatever there is, right? That all sounds amazing. But man, I'm going to go to the grocery store or I'm going to go to the corner store. How do I change their behavior, right? I'm not saying there's an easy answer to that. I'm saying that is the problem you have to figure out, okay? So I'm going to share for the folks who are on Zoom, and I'd like to hear from folks who are on Zoom too in a second. So there's a lot of learned behaviors and habits. That's one of the things that we're talking about with customers. They're implicit too. They're things that you wouldn't even be able to name sometimes, right? Why do I do this? Why do I have this value that why do New Balance shoes remind me of my dad? And so I have a positive, I'm literally talking about I look at, that's a thing for me because of that's something, a memory, it's etched into my memory, right? So how do you think about the brand that you're creating as well, right? What's the experience that you're creating for your customers, right? And then Maddie, I want to pull out something that you talked about as well. Customer relationships. How do I stay close to, there were a couple things you said. How do I stay close to the mission and values that I start out with and don't creep away from that, right? Because it's easy or necessary, right? How do I stay mission aligned if I'm a mission organization, a nonprofit, or a mission-driven for-profit? And then it goes to this top one, which is customer relationships, right? So this is who they are, customer segments. This is how I reach them, channels, right? This is why they want me, value proposition. This is, once I reach them, how do I keep that relationship strong? How do I build that trust? How do I keep them coming back, right? You notice that there is a definite time difference in this, right? Sometimes people say, these are the things that people say when they start a business. I have no competition, everyone's my customer, and they're going to love me because, I'm going to have lower prices than Walmart, right? No. wrong. You will not, that's not true in any sense, right? Your customer, you can say okay, I'm not going to discriminate against anyone who wants to buy from me could be my customer, but that's not helpful for business planning. Because I can't go and say, hey, everyone in the world, I have to target particular people who I think are going to be most moved by what I'm offering, right? And then I have to reach them somehow, right? In a place where they already are, a place where they gather, right? I have to have something that's valuable enough. The other thing that people say is people are going to love my customer service, right? Now, farmers don't always say that, and that's not always an experience in the agricultural world, right? But people do say that in the startup world. I can't love your customer service until I'm a customer. Customer service comes after. So you have to win me as a customer before you can keep me, right? Now it's hugely important because if you keep trying to get new customers and you don't try to nurture the relationships with your current customers, why do they love you? Keep coming back. Refer a friend, right? These types of things become the cyclical loop. It becomes the virtuous circle, right? If I can reach a customer, go through the whole process where they get my product or service, they love it, then they go and tell somebody else, that's the best thing for you as a business, right? The best marketing that you can ever do is word of mouth because the level of trust, but it's also the hardest to build, right? What you're probably also seeing is that there's a lot of work, right? So now I not only have to like make my product, I have to do all of this extra work, which is finding a customer, reaching them, educating them. There's not enough hours in the day, right? So if there's already something there, go where people already are. Look for where people already congregate. Look for, Priscilla was talking about aligned businesses or brands. Where are the communities of your customers, right? If I have to go one-off, I'm never going to reach the number of customers that I need to. I have to reach them, and especially as groups, like Priscilla was saying, they have values that they gather into groups, right? So it might be, maybe, I'm just throwing things out, maybe I find that faith-based communities are very aligned with certain values. Maybe I find that, I don't know, farmers markets are the places where it's aligned with the values. Where do you find that alignment? Don't push a rope. Try to find where people are already gathering and be there. And that might mean being with partners. That might mean, you know, things that you do alongside others who are reaching the same people you want to reach. It's from an old jazz standard tune called Accentuate the Positive. Has anyone ever heard that song before? Do you know the lyrics to it? Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In-Between. I'm going to say that again. Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In-Between. So what does that mean? I think about my value proposition. What is it? What's the positive? What's the value that I'm offering? And latch on when people, that resonates with them, right? If it doesn't resonate with them, don't mess with Mr. In-Between. You don't have time to win people over in that way. You need to find your people for whom they latch on. You accentuate the positive, latch on to the affirmative, right? Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, right? That's your value proposition. Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, value proposition. Latch onto the affirmative. When you find something that resonates with a community, double down on that. Don't mess with this in between. If it doesn't resonate, you don't have time as a startup to worry about how can I get all these other, I have to find who it resonates with. And then you have to play a game of like, yes, can I get around the edges and get more? But as a startup, generally, you need to build enough momentum so you can't spend a lot of time. That's a little strong, but I mean, that's sort of how I think about when you're starting something. So that point is great, which is, I'm not just thinking about those customers in a one-off sense. I am thinking about them as a group, and I am thinking about them as a segment, right? They behave in a certain way, they congregate together. But then I have to do some research, right? Business planning is about doing that research, doing that homework to figure out, can I go get information and find out how many people live in this area that I'm trying to, and how many people fit into. The public libraries are your best friends. They have tons of databases that you can use. There is a tool out there. My former employer, the Small Business Development Center, those are great resources for you as well, free resources. Give them a plug. They're awesome. there's a tool called Mosaic Tapestries, and this is a way that market research firms take a ton of data about consumer behavior and turn it into profiles. And then they take those profiles and they map them. And so you can use, if people are familiar with ArcGIS and Esri, there's like a mapping set of tools, right? They use that tool to map out by geographies where these customers are, right? So I might want to see, Esri has a tool called Know Your Neighborhood. And you can see, I can search by a geography, and I can see what the predominant tapestry segment is, right? Urban up-and-comers is like one of them, right? And it's like, tends to be their values. This tends to be their, income levels, education levels, all those things. Don't want to go too far into that, but that's kind of cool. We've really dug into this, and I love your engagement because this is definitely, to me, especially for someone in the early stages, this is the most important part in my mind of starting out your business and building a strong business, right? I'm going to go over to production and operations now. So production and operations, you want to think about this. I think most times folks in food businesses think about productions and operations first. And I understand why that's the case, right? Farming, you often think about, think about things in terms of production and operations. But what did we say about if you don't have a business? Who's the group that if you don't have a business? Customers. So it has to be customer-centric, right? So everything that you're producing, and this is some of the trick of if you're farming or doing other things, planning for who that customer is going to be can be difficult because there's a time lapse between when I plan and grow, right, and do my sort of that process and when I actually harvest and sell, right? There's a lapse. So that's a CSA helps you in that way to plan that out. So the other questions on this side are all about productions and operations, and they're about how do I produce in the best, most efficient way to meet my customer's demand, right? So how do I line up my organization to meet my customer's demand, right? So this is the other side of your value proposition. How does what you do in your operations actually deliver what your customers want? Is what I'm doing lined up with what my customers want? That's a key question because there's definitely times where that is not lined up in your business, right? That's the other side of your value proposition. The other side is, what are your key activities? What do I need to do to deliver value to my customers consistently? So let's talk about your businesses. What are the activities that you need to do to make sure that you can deliver valuable products, services, experiences to your customers?
So I am trying to acquire most of the herbs that I use to make my products as local as possible.
Yep.
So I constantly have to go out and harvest.
Yep.
That's just part of it.
Sure.
As much as I can so that I can dry and have as much to actually make things and
Yep.
kind of stay away from ordering to have it shipped.
Yep. So that's a question. Production process, the harvesting, the sourcing,
Yeah.
and that.
So part of my big pricing, like valuing my product, I price it a little higher because it's like local organic, like locally grown in Providence, roses and made, was used to make this rose oil.
Yep.
So like I really emphasize that
Yep.
as a justification for pricing.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
A lot of people in startups say, I'm gonna have all these extra values of what I do. I'm gonna be the best better quality, and I'm going to be cheaper than, everybody else, right? That's not sustainable. You can't, right? You have to choose, are you competing more on price or on quality, right? Are you competing more on how quickly it's available, how rapidly someone can get it, or they may have to wait, but it's a higher quality product or something like that. I want to give maybe an example that might be helpful. So of a business model choice around production, right? Where you want to offer high quality, high value on one end of the value proposition, but you also want to reduce costs in terms of the production. People know Revolution Foods. Is that something that people are aware of? It's in the food service space, right? So it's not, agriculture, it's further into the distribution, production sort of side of things. For school food, right? We talked about getting into a market like institutions, like schools or hospitals, very difficult for smaller farmers, right? Just out of reach for many small producers, right? You have to produce at a scale, and you have to produce at a price point that doesn't work for smaller farmers, right? But Revolution Foods, basically, what they've done is, so what do you get in school food, right? Because it has to be super cheap, right? And they have to drive price down as much as possible, what do you end up getting in school food a lot of times?
Ketchup as a vegetable.
Ketchup as a vegetable, commodity crops, right? Things that are subsidized. So what do you get not healthy food, right? So that's a huge there's all these social environmental problems around that, right? But how can Revolution Food, what they're doing is trying to do a very different business model, because what they're not going to change is the price pressure on institutions, right? That's not something that they can change. They can't go and say, well, you should just pay more, because that's not their customer. Their customer is looking for the price that works, right? So they have to work in that way. So how do you get higher quality food that's going to cost more but lower price? What else do you have in the mix? You have the inputs that are the food as that company, and then you have the inputs that are the labor. So you change the labor structure. So instead of Revolution Foods doing what Sodexo or others do that have very high labor costs because they have so many people that are managing their food service, they lower that by centralizing their production into one warehouse, right? And then delivering food that doesn't need to be prepared in the kitchens of each of the schools, right? So there's values aligned, right? But fits with a market. Now they can't do everything, right? Then if you have to drive labor costs down, that's a different trade-off, right? So there's always trade-offs in a for-profit model like that, right? But that's their way of thinking about production in a way that gets those two values. The values of the customer who needs the lowest priced food, but the social, environmental values, the other values around getting better quality food, locally produced food into our schools, right? So that's one example of how to think about that trade-off. And there's always those trade-offs, right? Okay, so that's your key activities, is mapping out your production, the different pieces of your production, what you have to do. Not just your production, but then mapping out your marketing, mapping out your sales, right? What are the things that I have to do to make this happen? Mapping out the financial piece. How do I keep track of these things, right? That's a set of things that I have to do, hats that I have to wear to run my business or my nonprofit, right? Key resources. What assets? What do I need to make this happen, right? Land, labor, capital in the economic sense, right? But what assets do I need? What human assets do I need? What people, what knowledge, what know-how, right? What connections, what information assets do I need? What financial assets do I need? What physical assets do I need? Do I need land? Do I need trucks? Do I need space for indoor agriculture? What is it that I need? Can I map those things out, right? Again, business model is a choice of what am I going to do in those things. So Revolution Foods, for instance, says, we can think differently about our activities and about our resources, and that changes our ability to provide a different value to our customer, right? So it's thinking differently about what are the resources and what are the activities, right? The last piece of this part, the production and operations, is your key partners, right? One of the things that we talked about in the reaching your customers and the channels is finding other people, businesses, organizations that are aligned, that are already reaching the customers that you want to reach, already reaching and rooted in the communities that you want to be a part of. What are the partners that I need? Who can help me create value, deliver value, right? Who can help me add more value to what I do, create a better product, reach more or better fit customers, and complement my offerings, right? And what's in it for them? So we talked about, Priscilla made the point, people go to, customers go, they congregate in different areas. They gather with people who share values, right? So I might want to find other businesses, other nonprofits, other organizations where what I offer is complementary to what they offer, right? And sometimes it's called co-opetition in the business world, right? Or sometimes it's called channel partners, right? How do I reach a group of customers? I might do it through a partnership. So vertical integration means thinking about your supply chain and thinking about like integrating across the entire, like what you need to provide. I think for the most part as a startup, you're not thinking that way as much, but so I think I would think about it as like, who are those partners? Who are those organizations? Who are those nonprofits, for-profits that you work with to reach your market, right? So I'm going to give a out there example, food business, but not agriculture specifically. But the way of thinking can get you thinking about different ways of doing this. Does anybody know PV Donuts? You do? Okay. So they're a local here. They make craft donuts, right? So they're already a different donut than Dunkin' Donuts, right? Dunkin' Donuts, do you know Dunkin' Donuts doesn't make their money on donuts at all? They don't even call themselves Dunkin' Donuts anymore because they don't make their money on donuts, right? What do they make their money on? Yeah, coffee. So donuts they might as well just like give the donuts away. It's the coffee, right? So PV Donuts took a different like market entirely, right? It was like craft donuts, right? And the way that they started out was through a partnership. So instead of going and leasing space to make their donuts, right? What they did was pop-ups. So they went to, do you know where they started out? They went to bars. So because their target market fit very nicely with those folks, right? Urban up-and-comers probably fits their like demographic pretty well, right? The other thing that works out well, it's complementary. Bars are open at night, they're not open in the morning. Donuts are usually, a pop-up would usually be in the morning, right? So if I've got friends who have a bar, or I can make friends with someone who has a bar, and I can use their kitchen, and I can pop up, I might pay them a bit to do that, but then I don't sign a long-term lease, right? Because what happens when I sign a long-term lease? What am I guaranteed that I have to do? To pay. What am I not guaranteed? That I will make money. I've guaranteed myself a bill, but I have not guaranteed myself revenue, right? So in a startup phase, sometimes if you can be creative around those partnerships, you can think about ways that you can pop up, for instance, in a business. It's a little harder with thinking about what you're growing and things, but that's just to think about key partners. How do I reach, who are those, that customer that I want to reach, where are they? Who are they with? What other businesses are they interacting with, or nonprofits or other organizations are they interacting with? Can I offer something that's a complementary value to those businesses and organizations? And then we might be able to partner, right? We might be able to bundle what we offer together. Might be able to have a pop-up event at a location, right? Breweries, wineries, are a place where you can have a pop-up event for food. It's a very natural sort of place, if that's the target market that you're going for. Whatever the target market is that you're going for, where are they? Where do they gather together? Where can I offer something that is complementary to what's being offered there, right? Breweries many of them don't offer food, right? So that's a natural place. Can you think about that for your business as well? Where's my customer? Where are they gathering? Can I offer something complementary where they're gathering? Okay, so for you, this means you're talking about the product quality, the service quality, the price, the brand experience. That's all part of your value proposition. Your marketing, your production, your financial activities, these are all key activities that you're engaging in. Your resources, your land, labor, capital, right? We talked about those things. Your key partners might be vendors or suppliers, might be farmers markets, might be cooperatives, might be land trusts that you're working with. If you're using land, you might have a relationship with a land trust, right? Might be a school.
Yep.
That's a perfect example, right? Thinking outside the box, sometimes I have to think creatively about who that partner can be to make it work. Controlled environment agriculture, not thinking of the name right now. Gotham Greens, Gotham Greens. So you should look into their business model. They are here in Providence now. They're around the country. One of the things that they've done is to partner with Whole Foods, I believe, and they build their controlled environment agriculture on top of Whole Foods markets. Farm Fresh Rhode Island is a hub, does a number of different things as a hub, as an aggregator. They could be a partner potentially for you all to sell into. So thinking about those potential partners. Okay, last section of this, we've had a really, really productive conversation, and so I've kind of gone with it. I know we've got a lot of information to cover, but thinking about the financial part of it, of your business planning, is thinking about two main things. How do you make money? And then what are the different types of costs that you have? And how do you have more money coming in than going out, right? And what's the timing of that? You guys are going to talk about that a lot more in the next session around the financials. But revenue streams is how you're making money. What are the different ways that you're making money? So they relate to the different channels that you're selling through, right? So it might be farmers markets, might be part of your revenue streams, but it's fee for product, right? It's people are paying you for product. Fee for service is another type of revenue stream, right? A buy one, give one model is a type of a revenue stream, like it's related to a revenue stream, right? A subscription, a CSA is basically a subscription, right? That's a business model. That's a revenue model, revenue stream. So a subscription, one of the benefits of a subscription is that it's predictable and recurring, right? So it's a good revenue stream because I can't always predict if I go to this market or that market what I'm going to sell. But if I can sell someone on a subscription, I can get them 1 month, and then I know that I can keep getting them to come back, so long as I keep them happy, the customer relationships thing, right? Lining up as much as expectation management is a big piece of it, right? Maybe others want to speak about CSAs and some of your experience with them, but you're right. I mean, to a certain extent, you communicate, and you have to communicate. It's that customer relationship. You have to communicate as well as you can, but people sort of know going into a CSA, I don't know exactly what I'm going to get, right? Sometimes people also do allow for kind of trades. If I don't want this item, I could double up on this item to a certain extent. There are creative ways that people get into CSAs. The easiest way for you as the producer is certainly like, you get the box with this regularity, and it has what we have when we have it. And we don't exactly promise that you're going to get any one thing or another, but this is the general sort of thing. but then there's oftentimes sort of trade-offs in that way. But as a revenue stream, it can be more predictable. It can be also the upfront sort of way of it allows you to get capital. It's like the original crowdfunding, right? Like it allows you to get that upfront capital and then deliver on the back end after you've produced the product. We talked about a few: fee for product, fee for service, subscription. There are other revenue streams out there, not as typical in the spaces that we're in. And then cost structure, what are the different types of costs associated with your operations? And we talked about different production models have different costs associated with them, right? I want to give you some key takeaways. So you have a choice in each area of your business models, what you'll focus on, and they have impacts on every other aspect of your business model, right? How you'll manage that is the question, right? Sustained success means wearing all of the hats. You're going to be like the circus act, you know, as a business owner starting up a lot of times, right? How well are you attending to each of those things, right? Am I thinking about my marketing? Am I thinking about my productions? Am I thinking about my financial management? I have to do all of those things, right? Or get other people and start to build up other people on my team who can do that. So this is a tool where you can map your current business model and think about your future business model, right? So you can use it in that way. So going back to, you know, this is the overview of it. This is the way that I think about it. Is what I do desirable? Does a customer want it? If it's not, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not start if it's not desirable, right? This is the road to ruin. You need to know that there's a customer out there who says, yes, I want that, right? So it needs to be desirable. Is it feasible? Can I actually do it? Okay, it's desirable. Yeah, I want this, I want that. Can you actually make it? Can you actually do it? Is it viable? Can I do something that's desirable that I can actually do, and then do it in a way where my revenue is more than my expenses consistently, right? Predictably if possible. Okay. I'm going to point you to this and not really go through it in depth. But I'm just going to sort of point out, without going through the slides, I'm just going to, so take your one-page business plan out and we'll just sort of quickly talk through that. Because then I'm also going to spend a few minutes talking about kind of legal entity questions. So this is another one-page tool for sort of mapping out the different pieces of your plan, right? I find it complementary to what we just did. So mission, vision, you know, values, those are kind of the key things of why I do what I do, who I am, how do I define that, right? Then objectives. So turn that into what are the high-level goals that I have. And you might do this once a year, right, is probably your timing for doing this, right? So mapping out what are my high-level strategic objectives for that year. And you might break them down into what I talked about, which is the focus: financial, operational, customer, and team, us, right? So I might have an objective that's financial. I might have an objective that's operational, production. I might have a goal that's customer-driven. I might have a goal that's team-driven, right? Then I'm going to map those out and map out my SMART goal, right? Think about SMART goals. So can you get specific around those goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, rewarding, and can I do it in the time that I have, right? But it's a way of thinking about, you know, how do I take like a goal that's up in the clouds and turn it into something that is an action plan that I can do, right? And that's the whole point of this, is to take sort of those, yes, I need a vision, and yes, I need I need to know where I'm going, and I need to know why I exist, right? And I need to not stray from that. But then I need to turn that into my plan around what am I going to do financially? What am I going to do operationally? What am I going to do marketing and customer-wise? What am I going to do in my team, right? And, I want to, for the purposes of showing you this, go to sos.ri.gov. I'm going to show people how to get to this, and then that'll help you. So if I go to sos.ri.gov, which is the Rhode Island Secretary of State's office, so they are the folks who, if you incorporate your business or nonprofit, you have to register with them, right? They have some good tools. So you go here and you go to business services. Are the folks on Zoom seeing this? You're going through? Okay, so business services. And then you go down here. There's a ton of great information. Then there's this one, plan for success. Okay?
That's for the Rhode Island business and plan for success.
That's right. And then this has a number of really good tools. It has a business plan template, set of business plan templates from SBA. It has some things about how to get your official name registered, right? So no one else can use it in the state. Now that is not a trademark. That's a different process if you want to actually have a trademark where someone else can't use it. Horror story, I had a guy come to me once who was starting one of those wine and paint night businesses. He came up, there's only so many puns you can make about wine and paint night. So he picked one of them and thought, oh, that's really clever. And then he spent a whole bunch of money making all of like the signage and everything. Literally while we were in a meeting together once, he got an email from a lawyer saying, cease and desist, my client has a trademark on this name, you cannot use it. So be careful around names. And you can get what's called a service mark through the state that only protects you in the state of Rhode Island. A trademark, if you want to go that way, is through the US Patent and Trademark Office. It's a more involved process. Be careful that people are not using the same name as you, because if they have it trademarked, then they have the legal right to go and say, you cannot use this name, right?
Do a quick trademark search.
You can do a trademark search through uspto.gov. Okay, your structure. This is what I want to talk about, okay? This is a tool right here.
I'm sorry, what's the name of the tool?
Your structure. You see the one that says your structure and then you can click on it? It's in that, were you at this one?
Oh, I see it.
Something go? Okay. Your structure, more about business structures. Then you can either get this as a PDF or you can get it and read it online. I want to give a high-level overview of different business structures, okay? So you have two sort of broad things as a business that you can be. You can either be unincorporated, which means there's no separate legal entity from you. It's you doing business as you, right? So I don't have to register with the state when I do that, right? Oftentimes I just have to register with my town, with my or city, my municipality, right? So the advantage is that it's easy. I can go out and sell. I may have to get other licenses, right, from other agencies, but I don't have to register here, right? The downside of it is legal liability. So if I'm doing business as me, if anything happens and someone sues, they sue me. And everything that I own personally is open in that lawsuit. Someone can come after my house, my car, my savings, anything that's attached to me, right? So that is an unincorporated business. That can either be, and I don't think, oh, here we go, sole proprietor. And a sole proprietor is if one person does that, right? A general partnership is if you have two or more people who do that, right? Yeah.
Sole prop can be a husband and wife team also.
It can, that's right. So it can be a married couple who do it jointly, right? So, but there's not a lot of formality to this, and there's not a lot of legal structure to this. It's advised to try to set up contracts and things, but it's not required. General partnership, there is a partnership agreement, but again, this is not an incorporated form, so it's not a legal form that the state recognizes, okay? Then you've got these ones over here, LLC, which people may be familiar with, or L3C, which is a low income I'm not going to get it all. It's a different form of like an LLC that's limited income version. LLC, there's also a workers' cooperative where the members own it and govern it, right? And there's different types of corporations, right? So these are incorporated. Now there is a separate legal entity from me, right? It's not me doing business as me. I'm going to talk about nonprofits in a second because they fall into a slightly different category. So I've got an LLC. An LLC can have one or more members, that's what they're called, and you develop an operating agreement and you file with the Secretary of State's office. And now you have a legal entity that is yours and that you do everything under and in the name of the legal entity, right? All contracts that I enter into are done through the name of the legal entity. It creates a legal barrier between me and my personal assets and the business. So long as I don't improperly mix those things, then I've got a protection there, right? And that's true for any of these forms, LLC, workers' cooperative, or any type of corporation, okay? There's different ownership structures that go into these, different ways that people own them versus if they are members versus shareholders, right? That goes into the kind of the finer details of that. But the basic idea is that you have something that is legally separate from you, okay? You can go more into the details of this. There's also, the Conservation Law Foundation has a legal food clinic. So they have for food businesses, which includes agriculture and other sort of things. Conservation Law Fund has a legal food clinic, hub, the legal food hub. Yes.
So I will say, if you set up any kind of entity structure and keep your personal and business separate, you still have to keep your financials and tracking and business all separate from personal. Do not mix it.
Right.
Or potentially you could be opened up to continuing to mix that in like legal, and you have to consult obviously with a legal person about that, but be aware of that. Try and keep everything separate as much as possible.
Right, that's a great point.
So also what I found is not only Conservation Law Foundation, they have a legal food hub, but also Roger Williams University, they have that's the only law school, has a law school. They have this service. They give you pro bono attorneys who can go over your business bylaws and things like that.
They call that their startup business clinic.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
Roger Williams Law School has their startup business clinic, and they do similar. So good to get that kind of legal guidance. The third, so there's the unincorporated, the various different types of legal incorporation that creates the separate entity. Like Jennifer said, you then have to manage that appropriately so that you're not mixing your personal things in with it in inappropriate ways, because then that can open you up for legal liability. The last one, and I'll get to questions about this in a second, is a nonprofit. A nonprofit is a type of a corporation. It is incorporated, right? I do file with the Secretary of State. A nonprofit is not owned by anyone, right? And no one gets profits from a nonprofit, right? So that's a tricky thing. What it means is that if you start a nonprofit, you don't have ownership of it, you don't direct it, you get a board of directors who then have the responsibility to direct it. They have what's called fiduciary responsibility, right? They have to make sure that it is run in a financially competent way, right? You have to have 3 members of that board of directors at least, right? You have to have a president or a chair, you have to have a secretary or clerk, and you have to have a treasurer, right? And then you can have as many other members as you want. That also means if you start a nonprofit and you're, say, the executive director of that nonprofit, you set up the bylaws of that nonprofit, generally, the board has the power to hire and fire an executive director. So you can start a nonprofit, you don't own it, and you may be in a situation where, a board ousts you, right? So you don't own it, you don't have rights to profits, and there's no profit sharing. What's used, if you have revenue left over in a nonprofit, you don't give it out as dividends to any owners or any sort of payments to owners. You use it to fund ongoing, to reinvest, to do other things that are allowed to do. So that's just an important thing about nonprofits. There's two levels of nonprofit. So one is at the state level. You incorporate with the state. And then the second is at the federal level. There are different nonprofit designations. One of them is what's called a 501c3. People have heard that?
Yeah.
That's like the legislation that sort of created that, right? 501c3. So that's a federal nonprofit, and it's a tax designation. It's not actually like a mission. You're supposed to serve a social, educational, environmental purpose, right? You have to file. There's a relatively long process to file to become a nonprofit. You have to file through the IRS, and then they go through their process of reviewing your application and approving or denying it or coming back and asking questions. They take a long time, especially during the pandemic. You've heard the Great Resignation. A lot of folks have left agencies, and I just worked with two different nonprofits, the one that I work for, the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, and another one that I helped to found that took about a year to get like fully established as nonprofits.
And could workers cooperatives be considered like nonprofits, or they have to be for-profit?
So workers' cooperatives are interesting. You can have a nonprofit that is governed, that the bylaws are governed in a way that's like a cooperative. So for instance, I was on the board of a nonprofit called the Cooperative Development Institute, which does cooperative development of all sorts, food co-ops, workers' co-ops, housing co-ops in New England and New York. They are a nonprofit, but their bylaws have cooperative values sort of built into it, but they're not cooperatively owned. Cooperative means a workers' cooperative. A cooperative is an entity, a legal entity that is owned by and run for the benefit of its members, right? And it usually has a set of kind of accepted principles. So for instance, one member, one vote is usually a principle in most cooperatives, right? So a workers' cooperative, the members are the workers, the employees of the business, right? But they're not employees, they're worker owners of the business. So a nonprofit can be set up in its bylaws to have cooperative governance, right? There's ways that the employees of the nonprofit have a voice in the governance of the organization, right? But it's not strict in the strict sense a workers' cooperative, because a workers' cooperative, what you also get, if you're a member of a food cooperative or you're the member of like REI is a very well-known cooperative, right? You get payments, right? Patronage payments, right? At the end of the year, it's like dividends, but it's like at the end of the year you get a benefit if they do well financially, right? You also share in the losses if you're an owner, right? So you're an owner, you have a share and you have a say in a worker cooperative. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you for being so engaged. If you have any, as I said, you can stick around and ask questions. If you have any wonderful praise, you can send it my way. Any gripes, you can send it Jennifer's way.